Arizona Territory. 1879. The wind carried the smell of dust and regret across the red flatlands when Everett Lane stepped off the stagecoach in the town of Dry Creek, boots hitting the ground like she was daring the earth to push back. People stopped what they were doing. A woman alone, tall, dark-haired, with that sharp edge in her green eyes. They remembered her, and they liked to forget. She stood straighter, hands clenched tight around the worn leather handles of her bag. One glance around the main street told her what she already knew: nothing had changed here. Not the cracked boardwalk outside the saloon, not the way folks whispered, not the way they stared. "Is that her?" someone muttered near the livery stable. "Thought she'd run off for good. She should have stayed gone." Everett didn't flinch. She walked past them all, chin high, heading straight for the only place she had left: the old ranch house on the edge of town, where her sister used to live before the fever took her last winter. What Everett had now were two children left behind: a wild-haired 6-year-old girl named Zadie and a quiet 4-year-old boy named Zeke. She had not seen them in 3 years. She had not been allowed to. They said Everett had disgraced the family, that no decent woman did what she had done. They said she had no place near children, but her sister was gone now, and Everett had come back. She reached the house by sundown. It was smaller than she remembered, the white paint peeling from the porch rails, the fields gone to weeds. But the front door opened before she knocked, and Zadie stood there, hands on her hips like a miniature version of Everett herself. "You're late," the girl said. Everett blinked. "Late? Uncle said you wouldn't come." "I told him you would." Behind Zadie, Zeke peeked around the doorframe, thumb in his mouth. Everett crouched down, her voice rough. "I am here now." Zadie nodded once like she was deciding something, then she stepped aside. "You can come in." Inside, the air smelled of dust and firewood. Everett moved carefully, not wanting to shake the fragile piece. But it shattered anyway when their uncle came down the stairs, her brother-in-law, Thomas, red-faced and fuming. "You think you can just waltz in here, Everett?" he snapped. "After what you did, they are not yours," Everett said quietly. "They are my sister's children, my blood. They do not need a saloon girl raising them." Everett's jaw tightened, but she stayed still. She had learned the hard way that shouting did nothing. "Let me stay a few days. Let them know me. Then if you want me gone, I will go." Zadie crossed her arms. "If she goes, I go." Thomas looked at the girl, then at Everett, then stormed out the front door without another word. The door slammed like a gunshot. That night, Everett sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars. She had nothing left but these children, and she would earn back their trust even if the whole town spit at her feet. She heard the crunch of hooves on dirt and turned. A rider was coming down the road, tall in the saddle, long coat fluttering behind him. The horse slowed as it neared the house, and the man swung down with a practiced ease, dust rising around his boots. He removed his hat. "Evening, ma'am. Name's Callum Graves," he said, voice deep and easy. "Thomas sent word you were back, said there might be trouble." Everett stood, arms folded. "You law?" "No, ma'am, just a neighbor." He looked at her like he saw something the others did not. "I run cattle 3 miles west. Helped your sister some when she was sick." Something shifted in Everett's face. "You knew her?" "I did. She talked about you." Everett's throat tightened. "I bet she did." "Not the way you think," Callum said. "She missed you." The porch light flickered in the breeze. Zadie and Zeke were asleep inside. Everett looked up at this tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with kind eyes and dirt on his boots like he had walked the whole way just to speak plain. She did not know what to say. Callum stepped forward, not too close. "I do not believe what they say about you, Miss Lane. And even if I did, sometimes a person's past just means they fought harder to be here." Everett blinked fast, jaw clenched. "Why are you really here, Mr. Graves?" He smiled, soft and sure. "Because nobody deserves to fight alone." Days passed. Everett stayed. She fixed the roof, cleaned the old barn, helped Zadie crawl through math lessons, held Zeke when he woke crying. She did not ask the town for anything. She earned her place back one quiet act at a time, and Callum kept showing up, with wood when the fire ran low, with a saddle for Zadie's pony, with a hand when the fence needed mending. He never asked questions she was not ready to answer. He just stood beside her, steady as the ground beneath them. One morning, while Everett was pulling water from the well, Callum stepped behind her and said, "You ever think about staying for good?" She turned, wiping sweat from her brow. "I was not sure I had the right. You are here." "That is more than most ever do." Everett looked down at her hands, then up at him. "Why do you care?" Callum's voice was low. "Because since the day I saw you walk back into this town, I have not wanted a future that did not have you in it." Everett stared at him, heart thudding. "I know your past," he said, "and I do not give one damn about it. I see what kind of woman you are now." She did not move, but her eyes shimmered. "You do not even know what I know enough," he said gently. "And I know this: if you will have me, I will make sure you never carry anything alone again." Everett stepped forward, slow but sure. Her hand found his. She held it tight. And for the first time in years, she let herself believe someone might choose her not in spite of her past, but because he saw her whole. Callum leaned down, just enough to rest his forehead against hers. "We build something new," he said. "Together." Everett nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes." The wind moved soft through the mesquite trees behind them, and for the first time in a long time, Everett Lane felt like she was finally home. The summer deepened its hold on the land. Dry Creek baked under the sun. The sky, a washed-out blue, stretched far and wide over parched fields and stubborn mesquite. Everett stood behind the house, sleeves rolled to her elbows, coaxing tomatoes from a patch her sister had left half wild. The plants were leggy and thirsty, but they clung on, and that counted for something. Inside, Zadie was humming as she pressed scraps of calico against a wooden hoop. Everett had taught her the first stitches of embroidery 2 evenings before, and the girl had taken to it like a foal to its legs, awkward, determined, proud. Zeke sat nearby, too small to sew but content to sort buttons into neat piles across the table. The quiet was interrupted by a knock that came not from the door, but the side of the house where the sun left long shadows. Everett stood, dusting her hands, and rounded the corner. Callum was there, holding a bundle of fencing wire over one shoulder. His hat was off, his shirt damp with sweat across the collarbone. "I was fixing the South Post line," he said. "Found your gate's been dragging in the dirt. Figured you'd want it lifted before the rains come." Everett took the offered wire and set it on the porch. "You always make a habit of fixing what isn't yours." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Only when I see something worth keeping." She looked at the ground between them. "The gate, you mean?" His voice caught just slightly. "That too." She didn't answer right away. The breeze picked up, warm and gritty. "I need to ride into town tomorrow," she said finally. "Supplies are thinned out. Flour's near gone, same with salt pork. Might look for a second-hand tin kettle if I can find one." "Then I'll drive you in," Callum said. "I can handle the team." "You can, but you don't have to." Everett lifted her eyes to his, slow. "I don't want talk starting again." "They're already talking." She studied his face. The lines around his mouth were deeper than she'd noticed before, like time had carved them with care. He had a steadiness about him that didn't ask for proof. It just was. "Fine," she said. "But I'm buying the kettle." Next morning, the wagon creaked out of the yard just after first light. Zadie and Zeke stayed behind with old Mrs. Browning. the widow who lived 2 doors down and had shown up on the porch with a loaf of molasses bread and a quiet offer to help. Everett had nodded once and let her in. The road into Dry Creek was rutted and dry, the wheels jostling across hardened earth. Callum handled the reins with one hand, the other resting across his thigh. "You ever think of leaving again?" he asked, eyes ahead. Everett kept hers on the horizon. "I used to. Before my sister passed, I'd wake thinking about trains I could catch. Places where no one knew my name. You don't wake that way now." "No," she said. "Now I wake thinking about how to stretch sugar over 3 days." Callum nodded, the horses clopping steady. "I left once," he said. "Went up to Colorado, worked freight teams through the passes. Thought I'd stay gone." "What brought you back?" "My brother's widow," he said. "She got consumption. I came to help her through it. Buried her last autumn." Everett glanced sideways. "I didn't know." "You wouldn't," he said. "Most folks don't ask." They rode a while in silence. The town came into view, low buildings crouched beneath the sun, a few folks already moving along Main Street. As they passed the Mercantile, Everett noticed the curtains twitch. A woman crossed the street with her head turned the other way. They tied up outside the general store. Inside, the scent of tobacco and dry goods greeted them. Mr. Gilly, the shopkeeper, looked up from behind the counter. His mouth pressed into a thin line when he saw her. Everett kept her back straight. "Half a sack of flour, 4 pounds of pork, coffee beans if you've got them." Gilly measured each item without a word, scribbling figures in his ledger. Callum brought over a kettle from the back shelf and set it between them. "This one's solid," he said. "No leaks." Gilly rang the total. Everett reached inside her satchel for the coin she'd wrapped in cloth. Her fingers brushed the note her sister had written before she died, folded into a square and tucked there ever since. She didn't take it out, just counted the coins and laid them down. Outside, the sun had shifted westward. Callum carried the sack while she took the kettle, and they loaded the wagon without speaking. As they turned back onto the road, Callum said, "You stood taller in there than most men I've known." "I didn't feel tall," she said. "You were." They rode the long miles home with the wind at their backs and the sky open above them. Everett didn't look behind her once. The monsoons came late that year, dragging behind them a heat that pressed against the skin like wet wool. Thunderheads gathered low and dark over the far hills, promising rain but delivering only wind and the brittle scent of lightning. Everett stood in the barn with her sleeves rolled and her hair pinned back, mending a broken harness with thread coarse enough to cut skin. Her hands moved steady, but her thoughts drifted. Zeke had started asking about his mother's song, some tune she used to hum when she worked with flour on her hands, and the light slanted through the kitchen window just right. Everett didn't know the words, only remembered the hush of it, like a lullaby meant more for the singer than the child. She hadn't told Callum about it yet. The barn door creaked behind her. "You patching that harness or making a new one from scratch?" She didn't turn. "If you're going to stand there, might as well bring that oil can." Callum crossed the floor and passed it to her. "I just came from your north field," he said. "Saw a pair of mule deer bedded down near the cottonwoods. Zadie might like to see them before they move on." "She's with the schoolmistress this afternoon," Everett said, "learning her letters. She told me last week she already knows how to spell dangerous." Everett gave a quiet breath through her nose, not quite a laugh. "She would." Callum leaned against the stall post. He held his hat loose in one hand, dust clinging to the brim. "I've been thinking about building a smokehouse. Winter's not far off, and I figure if I've got the extra, I could share." She tied off the thread and bit it close. "You offering meat or looking for help with the build?" "Both," he said. "Mostly I'm offering something steady." She wiped her hands on a cloth and finally looked up. His eyes held to hers with the same quiet steadiness she'd grown used to, but today there was something else, an edge of resolve, like a man who'd drawn a line he was ready to defend. "I've been honest with you," she said, voice low, "but there's more I haven't spoken of. Things that won't sit well with some." "Then tell me," he said. She stepped around the sawhorse, folding the cloth into her palm. "After I left here the first time, I worked in a place up in Prescott. Not a saloon, not exactly. The man who ran it called it a private club. There were rules, no harm, no force, but it wasn't clean, not the way people in this town expect." Callum didn't move. "I didn't have a choice at first," she went on. "Then I did, and I stayed longer than I should have. The money was good. Men paid to talk mostly. I listened." "You regret it?" he asked. "I regret what it cost me. My sister stopped writing. My father told the neighbors I'd died from a fever. Zadie was still nursing when I left." Callum's jaw tightened, but not with judgment. "Do you feel ashamed?" "I did." "Not anymore." She searched his face. "But I won't pretend it didn't happen." "You don't have to," he said. "I wasn't raised to measure a person by what they had to do to survive." Everett felt something loosen in her chest, like a knot she hadn't known was there finally gave way. "Zeke's been asking about the song," she said. "I've been trying to remember it, but all I can give him is silence." Callum stepped forward, slow. "You don't have to remember every word, just hum what you can. He'll hear the heart of it all the same." She looked down, throat tight. "I wish I had more to give him." "You've already given him a mother who came back," he said. "That's more than most boys ever get." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the hay in the loft. The scent of rain hovered close now, not yet falling but ready. Everett reached for the harness again, but Callum laid a hand over hers. "I want to build more than a smokehouse, Everett," he said. "I want a home that's full of voices, and yours is the one I want to hear at the end of every day." Her hand stilled beneath his. "I'm not asking for your past," he added. "I'm asking for your future." She looked up at him, and something broke open in her quietly, without fuss, like the first soft crack of thunder before the sky lets go. "I don't know how to give that," she said. "Then let's figure it out together." A long silence passed between them, filled with the hum of the barn and the waiting air. Everett nodded once. "You build the smokehouse. I'll bring the salt." Callum smiled, not wide, just enough. "Then we've got to start." That night, Zadie climbed onto her lap after supper, bare feet cold from the flagstone floor. "Did Mama really sing a song about rivers?" she asked. Everett brushed the girl's hair back. "About rivers and rain and things that always find their way home." Zeke leaned against her side, thumb tucked under his chin. She hummed, slow and uncertain, until the shape of the tune came back in pieces. The children listened with their heads resting near her ribs, and Callum sat at the table, cup in hand, listening too. The storm broke sometime before dawn. Rain tapped steady against the roof while Everett lay beside the one she had come home for, her fingers curled into Callum's, the sound of the world finally soft around her. The first frost came quiet, dusting the porch rails and paling the fields before dawn. Everett rose early, the air inside the house sharp enough to see her breath. She layered Zeke in wool and wrapped her own shawl tight before stepping onto the porch with a basket of kindling pressed to her hip. The coals in the stove had burned low overnight. She'd need a stronger fire before breakfast. Across the yard, Callum's wagon pulled in, an oilskin roll tied behind the seat. He climbed down with a nod, his boots crunching over frostbitten grass. "I brought the draw knife you asked after," he said, lifting the bundle onto the porch. "For the smokehouse frame." Everett rested the basket against the step. "You came early. You said you wanted to start before the ground froze up." She opened the door and warmth spilled out around her ankles. "Then we'd best get to it." They worked side by side as the sun cleared the ridgeline. Callum drove the stakes while Everett sawed the posts to length, her hands steady on the teeth of the blade. No one passed by the road that morning, only the crows called from the fence posts, watching like judges from a high bench. By midday, the smokehouse frame stood upright, 4 walls marked out and ready to be boarded. They sat on overturned crates beneath the cottonwood, sharing thick slices of rye bread and dried apples. Everett kept her eyes on the unfinished roofline. "I've been thinking," she said. "Zadie's near 7. She'll want her own boots soon, real ones, not hand-me-downs." Callum chewed slow. "You want I should speak with the cobbler. She'll need to earn them," Everett said. "I don't want her thinking anything worth having comes from someone else's pity." He nodded, brushing crumbs from his palm. "Then maybe she could help me with the spring calves. There'll be fence line riding to do. I'll pay her for her time." Everett looked at him, her mouth softening. "You'd let her ride your land?" "She doesn't scare easy," he said. "And I trust her to listen. That's more than most gave me at her age." Callum reached into his coat, pulling out a folded paper. "I meant to show you this sooner." She took it, frowning. "What is it?" "Deed to my east pasture. I've been drawing up plans to build a cabin there, small at first. 1 room, loft above. But with the right hands it could grow." Everett studied the paper. "You're offering me land. I'm offering you a place that belongs to you if you want it." Her voice caught. "You don't owe me that." "I owe myself a life that feels real," he said. "And you're the only part of this territory that's ever made it feel like something worth waking up to." She folded the deed, hands trembling just slightly. "I don't know how to accept something I never expected." "You don't have to yet," he said. "Just know it's yours when you're ready." They stood again, brushing dust from their coats. The afternoon waned gold across the hills as they fit the first planks onto the smokehouse wall. Everett held the boards while Callum hammered them flush, neither speaking, their rhythm steady. As the sun dipped lower, a rider crested the road beyond the pasture. Everett squinted toward the figure, slowing as he neared. The man dismounted, tying his horse near the gate before walking up with his hat in hand. "Name's Lyons," he said. "I was told Everett Lane lives here." Everett stepped forward, cautious. "That's me." Lyon's gaze softened. "I knew your sister. I served with her husband during the war. She wrote to me once, said if anything happened to her, I should come see to the children. Took me this long to get clear of Kansas." Everett's spine went stiff. "Your kin?" "No," he said gently, "but I made a promise." Callum moved closer, silent beside her. "I don't mean to unsettle anything," Lyons went on. "Just want to see them, leave something behind." Everett held her ground. "They're inside. You can speak with them, but they have a home now." Lyons nodded. "That's all I needed to know." He didn't stay long. He gave Zadie a book of poems, the kind printed on rough paper, and left a brass button for Zeke, "From a soldier's coat," he said. Then he tipped his hat and rode off without asking for anything more. That night, Everett stood at the window long after the children were asleep. Callum joined her, his hand brushing hers as he looked out over the frost-covered fields. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know what I ever did to deserve peace," she said. "Maybe it's not about deserving it," he answered. "Maybe it's about choosing it when it's offered." Everett turned to him, and for the first time she reached for him without hesitation. Her fingers curled at his collar, pulling him close until their foreheads met. "You still want to build that cabin," she whispered. "I do." "Then build it," she said. "And I'll fill it with the kind of life they said I couldn't have." Callum kissed her slow, the promise not in words but in the way he held her like she belonged. Outside, the frost deepened, and the world turned quietly toward winter. But inside the house, warmth grew from the center, steady as the fire Everett fed each morning, now with hands no longer alone. A pale sun climbed over the San Francisco peaks in the distance, throwing pale gold across the patchy fields. The frost had thawed in ribbons and the ground was softening underfoot. Everett stood in the east pasture, sleeves rolled, her fingers curled around the haft of a spade. The soil there was blacker than she'd expected, richer. It would take to seed come spring. Callum approached from behind, boots quiet on the damp earth. He carried a bundle of cedar stakes under one arm and a folded bit of paper in the other. "They're yours now," he said, holding out the deed again, this time signed and sealed. "The cabin's halfway framed. Once the roof's on, we can move your things in." Everett took it in both hands. She didn't speak right away, but her eyes traced the lines of ink, the bold shape of her name written in a hand that wasn't hers. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron. "I want to plant corn here," she said, "and beans along the fence line. Zadie can help with the sowing. She's got a good feel for rows." Callum set down the stakes. "So you're staying?" Everett turned to face him fully. "I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, while Zeke napped and Zadie rode out with Mrs. Browning's niece to check the creeks, Everett and Callum worked side by side in the foundation of the new cabin. The air still held the sharp edge of winter, but the sun was warm on their backs. She handed him nails while he secured the floorboards, each one driven with sure hands. When the light shifted and shadows stretched long, Callum sat back on his heels and wiped his brow with the inside of his wrist. "You ever think about what you'd have done if life had gone different?" he asked. Everett sat beside him, arms resting on her knees. "Sometimes. But then I remember I have Zadie and Zeke, I have this land, and I have you. I wouldn't trade that for anything I imagined before." He looked over at her. His voice was quiet. "I never thought I'd belong anywhere again, not really. But you made space for me without asking for anything back." "I didn't have to ask," she said. "You gave it freely." He reached for her hand, rough palm closing over her fingers. "I want to marry you, Everett." She didn't flinch. "I thought you might." "I don't care about a church or paper," he said. "We can speak vows ourselves with the land and sky as witness." "Then let's do it tomorrow," she said, eyes steady. "While the ground's soft enough to hold our promise." The next morning they stood under the cottonwood tree, where the first buds had begun to swell at the tips. Zadie held wildflowers in her hands, her stockings muddy from chasing a rabbit earlier that morning. Zeke clung to Everett's skirt, sleepy but content. Mrs. Browning came to stand with them, holding the children while Everett and Callum faced each other. There was no preacher, no audience, just the wind moving soft through the grass and the smell of cedar from the cabin frame. Callum reached into his coat and drew out a narrow band of silver, simple and unmarked. He slid it onto Everett's finger and said, "I give you my whole life, and I ask nothing but your hand in mine." Everett took his hand in both of hers. "I give you my heart without condition. And I take your name not as a surrender but as a joining. We will build this together." He kissed her then, slow and certain, and when they stepped back, Zadie clapped her hands and whooped, startling a pair of finches from the eaves. That night, they sat at the table in the old ranch house, their house now, while rain tapped lightly on the roof. Everett ladled stew into bowls while Callum poured coffee from the kettle she'd bargained for months back. Zeke fell asleep in his chair, spoon still in hand, and Zadie leaned against Callum's arm, thumb tracing the edge of his shirt like she was stitching him into the fabric of her life. Everett watched them, heart full past the edges of her ribs. "You never did tell me what made you come to Dry Creek in the first place," she said. Callum looked at her over the rim of his cup. "I was looking for a place that felt like it belonged to the bones in my body. I didn't know it'd be a woman with fire in her voice and children who looked like they'd already survived a war." She smiled, tired and full. "Well, you found us." "I did," he said. "And I'm never leaving." In the spring, they moved into the cabin walls finished, a stone hearth built by Callum's hands, shelves lined with glass jars and stitched linens. Everett planted that corn. Zadie rode fence with her boots worn proud. Zeke chased frogs near the creek and came home with stories no one could quite believe. Everett rose each morning before the sun, Callum beside her, his breath warm against her shoulder, his arm tucked around her waist like she was the anchor he'd been waiting for. They built a life not from what they'd lost, but from what they'd chosen, each other, and they never looked back.